but don't carry them home. Just kidding, I don't do. Okay, so for the first one, this is probably the easiest one, and you get candy, so feel free to speak out. If you have this is the blue, this is the orange, so this is blue and red. So what kind of positioning should be on the blue container? Assuming that this is, I'm going to erase this. Assuming that this is the top of the document, so one of these arrow things. So this is 0, 0 of the document.
Shouldn't need anything, right?
Yeah, okay, so you don't need, so when you try to position the red one, and you say like position, whatever, like what kind of position would you put on the red one?
Should you also just not do anything for this case?
Yeah. So you could, there are multiple different answers. So actually, no, you need to do something. So if these are both divs, wait.
No, but
Oh yeah, you don't need to do anything. What are we talking about? Yeah, okay. So there are multiple different answers. First of all, you could do nothing. Easiest answer ever. If you haven't filled out the quiz yet, you got this one right. Another answer is to actually put position. So you can put position, anything, and then like top left, and then these can both be 0 pixels, right? And then this one can be position anything. Anything either relative or absolute, and top left is 0. I'm just abbreviating this, and 0 pixels. Question?
Yeah, if you do nothing, won't they display in a block so the red will be underneath the blue one?
Yeah, but the, did you see the HTML? So
no.
You have a div up here, and the red one is actually inside of it.
I didn't,
so it's like
I didn't see
div,
that.
blue, and then the end of that div, and then the div red is in here, right? So then it actually won't do anything because they'll both be automatically aligned in the top left corner, as long as they have their width set. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Wait, who answered? Can you give back Andy? I totally forgot. I didn't do it. I think she was actually. Okay, next question.
Oh, I guess I said left with you blank.
I do not know how to use Windows anymore. So what about for this one? What would you guys put for here? So what kind of positioning does the blue one need? Should I answer? Yes, Eric.
It needs to be positioned, so absolute.
Okay.
And then just like top and left is 0.
Any other answers? Any other answers for this? Why do you need to have? Why does it need to have a position? What if you're so pretend this is your browser window? Why does this blue div need a position on it? What if I just didn't put any position? Like just cross this out. What would happen when you try to position this red one in here?
It doesn't have a parent?
Yeah, so remember for absolute positioning, it positions itself relative to its closest positioned parent. So if this one is not positioned, it'll actually go over here to the document. Yeah? Does that make sense? What's really important? Yeah.
Was it on default position if nothing's specified?
It's by default it's position static. And that's not doesn't count as a type of position.
Oh, but it doesn't count.
It has to be either, so this could actually be relative too. It doesn't matter as long as it has some positions set. Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
If you have some positions set to static and then set the top and left, would that help it?
It doesn't go anywhere because static means just stay where it is.
Alright, because like the only reason why you need to define the top and left is for the red, right?
You actually, so good question. You actually don't need this top and left here because it automatically is, so the blue one is positioned by default top 0, left 0, and its parent is the document, so it's the lowest.
The
Any question? Sorry.
The red, so like the red, like the blue has to be defined top and left the position because otherwise, just like you said, the red wouldn't go where it is.
It doesn't need the top and left, but it does need the position.
Okay, so
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You guys should all know this. We did the quiz, or the pseudo quiz. Anyone know what the red should be? This is pretty easy. So here is its parent. What's its top, left, or other things? Oliver?
Is it position relevancy?
Oh, so position. So what would you say the position? Okay, so you said position relative.
Yeah.
Is that it?
And then top 0, right 0.
Okay. So if you have, so it's originally over here, right? Like the red thing is originally over here. And do you remember what position relative does?
To the parent.
Position relative is to where it's supposed to be. So absolute is the one that's in relative to its parent. And then relative is like a relative to where I used to be. So if you say right or left 10 pixels for, if you do relative and you say left 10 pixels, it used to be over here, so now it'll be 10 pixels over here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So any suggestions on how we can fix this one?
Breaking.
Make it absolute.
Yes, make it absolute.
Yeah.
And then this one, top, just like Oliver said, top 0 and right 0. Right? So because it's on the right side, because it has no space between its right side and its parent's right side, so it will go over here. What happens if you want, yeah?
I'm still kind of confused why blue has to be position.
I can't hear you.
I'm still kind of confused as to why blue has to be position.
Oh, because when you say position absolute, it'll, so when you say position absolute on the red one, it positions itself in relative to its closest position parent. So if the blue one isn't positioned, then its closest position parent is the document instead. And it would go over here instead of inside.
So even though it's like defined
Yeah.
as a div, but then
Yeah.
Do you need the top 0 picks on that?
No, so this is optional.
Okay. I mean on the red one too?
Yeah, cause, no, you don't need, so this is optional as well. So there are many, like when you're doing these like positioning things, there are many different answers. So you could put 0 if you want to be like more explicit. If not, it's already on position on the top anyway, so it's automatic. Okay, next one.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Is there a way you could have done like left where like you do like the width of the blue
Yeah.
box divided by 2?
Yeah, you could do that. So good point, as Eric said, that you can, instead of using right 0, if you know the exact pixel length of this, you could actually say like left, and this is the width of the red box minus the width of the blue. The other way around. Blue box minus the width of the red box. Right? So this is 100, and this is 200, and this is 100. Then you want to set the left to 100, and that would give you the same thing, right?
There's no way to do like the div, get like the dot property,
Dot property?
like can you dynamically like look up the width?
With JavaScript.
Okay.
Yeah, with JavaScript you can dynamically do these kind of things, but so like this is not ideal for if you have like flexible layouts like to do this kind of thing because you don't know what the width will actually be. So if you say right 0, it'll always stick to the very right side. Yeah.
How does JavaScript communicate with CSS?
It doesn't communicate with CSS. JavaScript looks at the DOM, which is the document object tree or model. Yeah. So your HTML, if you look in Firebug, you'll see this kind of tree. So like, remember you had HTML and like body something, and then all your divs, right? So JavaScript actually can look at these, can like kind of have like selector functions also, just like CSS does. And the cool thing that it can do that CSS can't is it can modify it on the fly. So that's how you get like animations. So you can set like your JavaScript, whenever you like hover over here, this thing moves to the side. So it can actually modify HTML elements, and that's how you can. Yeah. So if you had a left over here, and you wanted to make the blue box a flexible width, you could look up the width of this with JavaScript and then do those instructions and set the CSS. Does that make sense? Did I lose everyone? Okay. Keep going. Okay. Next one. These are all kind of like the same, so it's your chance to get candy. These are pretty easy. So, blue box, what is it? What is the styling on the blue box? This is a hint. It's exactly the same as the other questions. Yeah.
absolute or relative.
Okay, position can be anything, and except for static. Yeah.
Yeah, and then at the top and the right, top and the left, if that's optional.
Okay, top left 0, and this is optional, right? Good. What about red? This is really, really similar to the last question. Yeah, in the back.
Position absolute, right bottom 0.
Position absolute, and right and bottom 0 pixels. Am I going really slowly, or is this making sense to people?
Yeah.
Who thinks I'm going way too slow? Okay. Sorry. You're outvoted. So right and bottom means there's no space. So there's 0 pixels on the bottom and 0 pixels on the right, right? Does that make sense to everyone? How these CSS positioning things work? And again, it's positioning it relative to its closest position pair, which is blue because blue has position. Okay. Alan, can you scroll? Okay. Oh, what? Sorry. So these ones are slightly trickier. So what about this? Do you think I can reach that? Okay, blue. Someone raise your hand and tell me what blue styling is. Same. I'm just going to write same because I'm tired of writing it. Same. What about red?
Same as the last one.
Same as above. You can see there's a pattern emerging here. As above, right? By the way, how cool is this that I'm like writing on the paper?
Yeah, I think
Super cool. What about the green one? Someone who has the hand in the back.
Absolute top right.
Absolute top and right. Yeah, exactly, right? So its closest position for this little green thing, its closest position pair is this red one that has the position set, and its right is 0 and its top is 0. Okay, this one is the kind of tricky one. So whoever can get this one will get 2 candies. That's incentive enough. Back right corner.
I said position absolute for the blue.
Okay, so basically the same thing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And then for red, I said position absolute. And
Okay.
top is 0 pixels.
Okay.
And right is negative 100.
Right, exactly.
Yay.
2 candies. Okay, does everyone understand how that works? So you're saying that from this is the same thing that we've been doing, but you should remember that you can use negative number. Okay, a lot of questions. Yes, question.
Is it necessary to have top 0 pixels?
No, it's not. This is optional.
Cool.
Question.
Could you float both of those as well?
Yes, you can also float them, but we're going to be learning about floats next
They're
time.
each other.
Oh wait, oh no, shoot, sorry. They're inside each other. Good job. Now you get a candy. Does that answer your question? They're actually inside of each other. If you remember the HTML. And if you try to float them, this one will be floated to the left, right? And this one will be floated inside of it. To the left. Sorry, my bad. Forgot they were nested. But does this make sense there? Yeah.
Sorry, what's this book?
Oh, we're going to be learning floating. This is the extra for experts from the last class. Yeah, you don't have to know what floating is right now. But yeah, for this one, everyone understand this one? So there is a top, there's 0, and then there's a negative 100 on the right side. So it just flips over. So this is kind of tricky way, a kind of cool way of doing this kind of styling instead of like doing floating. Like if you want to do this and they were not nested, like you would, like you said, float them. This is pretty cool though. So that is the positioning workout worksheet. If you guys have any more questions, you should come ask me during lab. So positioning is like really important. So because you guys will be using it on your projects and your labs, and from now on we'll kind of assume that you know positioning for our more advanced topics. So if you don't understand, just like make sure you ask. Oh, okay. Well, let's lock the laptop. Okay, so today you guys will be learning Photoshop. Alan will be giving you a lecture on Photoshop. So those of you who have Photoshop on your computers, you can go ahead and open them up and kind of, but don't go too crazy. Just like kind of play with the options as he's teaching them, so you guys can have it more embedded in your head or whatever. And for those of you guys, we're really sorry. We thought that all of the lab machines had them installed, and I saw the email like really late today, but we found this online editor that's really, really similar to what Photoshop is. It's Pixlr, so I'll write on the board. pixlr.com/editor. pixlr.com/editor. My pen is dying, so yeah. Huh?
Okay.
So it's really similar to what Photoshop is. I even think the buttons are in the same position, so if you guys want to use this one, it's totally fine. Huh?
I was just saying it's awesome.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's really awesome. I saw this, I was like, wow, this is really well done, and it's really fast and everything. So it has all the features Photoshop has basically, well, as far as what we'll be covering in these labs. So yeah. Anyone have questions about the online thing? If you can't find it or anything? Pixlr, so pixlr.com/editor. So yeah, so it's really nice.
Should we make a new image?
Yeah, you can just make it, do the default new image, and then you guys can kind of play around with these options as he's introducing what they are. I'm just saying.
All right, so we're gonna start the lecture. This lecture has has kind of two parts to it. One is kind of introduction to how we're going to approach using Photoshop with respect to web design, and the second part is basically just how you move around in Photoshop. All right, so the first part of today, you went over, did a positioning review worksheet. Remember the 4 types of positioning: static, relative, absolute, and fixed. And remember that absolute and fixed remove the element from document flow. So.
No, they have like this online Photoshop.
Okay, so today, everyone make sure you've entered in your lecture code for today, 107694, and if you haven't, yeah, do that now. So far for your lab last week, you've basically done, what you've done is basically all solid colors. And, I mean, the layout looks really nice, but it's not something like this. There's no pictures, right? So we're going to fix that today, and what we're going to, how do we get there? So the first part of today is, the answer is CSS background image. So what this does is that it takes your elements that you've made, like your divs or spans or things like that, and it gives it a background image, so it kind of feels like there's something around it. We'll talk more about this, but note that we can only have one background image per HTML element, and there's 2 properties for background position, which we'll go more in depth in a second, which is background position and background repeat, which you can specify where you want your background to be and how you want it to be. Okay. So background image example. This is kind of like a login form, and you can see that it looks pretty nice. The buttons are pretty nicely styled, but I mean, it doesn't look. It just is on a plain gray background, right? And if you add a background image to this, it'll look a little nicer. You can, it looks more acceptable. And so how do we do this? We do this by first creating kind of a mock-up in Photoshop, and then from this mock-up, and a mock-up is basically just an entire image of your design, just a picture of what you want your website to be like. So you create that in Photoshop, and then you identify the divs in your mock-up. So it's basically what you did last week, right? You had the Amber asked you guys, where are the divs in this picture, and you do that to your mock-up, and then you code your divs in HTML, CSS, which is what you did for lab last week. And then we slice up our Photoshop mock-up for use with background image, which is what we're going to do today. And then we attach these background images to our divs. So anybody have any questions so far? Sorry, I gotta go fast because there's a lot of stuff to go through, and we don't have much time. Okay. So why do we even use images at all? CSS2 only handles single color rectangles. So you can't have gradients, you can't have rounded corners, reflections, or rotations. But CSS3 does all of that above. Why don't we just use CSS3? Any questions? Any answers? Why don't we just use CSS3 for all our needs?
is it not supported yet?
Yeah, because it's not widely. It's pretty supported right now, but as you see from this chart, it's not completely supported. I.e. Okay. IE 6, 7, and 8 do not support this. And how many will know how many percent of people use IE 6, 7, and 8?
70.
6, 7, and 8 added together is like 60, 70% of the internet. So
Those poor fools.
yeah, a lot of people. So more than half the people you use if you use CSS3 won't see your special effects. So that's why we gotta still use images. We will be covering CSS3 later, but for now we'll still
Next
be
lecture.
We'll still be using CSS2 for this lecture, but next lecture you'll learn how to do it. Alright, so I've got that background image, which is basically puts a background image to your element. But what's the difference between the image tag and background image? Image tags are instances where your content is actually your image. Like you have a photo gallery, or if it's a profile picture, or if it's your if your site logo. I mean, it's stuff that that you would want people. I mean, it's stuff that is important to your website. Okay. Background image is stuff just part of the presentation structure. It's stuff that makes your design look nicer, but it's not necessarily like if it wasn't there, people would still know what your site did. All right. So in this picture, who can identify the background pic? Who can identify the background images in this picture?
Which ones look like images?
Yeah.
Basically.
Which ones are pictures that are in the background of a div or?
Bless you.
No.
Bless you.
Yeah.
Well, on the right, like that orange button looks like it's on top of the background image.
Yeah. So this skyish back. That's a background for your body, right? That's right.
Sorry. That's a row.
Anyone else? Yep.
Navigation bar on the 8.
Yeah, the navigation bar that you can kind of see that this this background basically repeats, and it's I don't know if you can notice, but it's a slight gradient, so it repeats across here, this way. Anyone else? There's Candy.
There is candy.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna go over this wood frame is actually a background, so for this. So this wood frame is actually background. It just makes the content look nicer, but it's not necessarily part of the actual flow of the page itself. Okay. What are the pictures in here? What are the images in here? What is actual part of the presentation structure in this picture?
You did not make this slide.
Yeah.
Alex did.
So it is weird.
Disclaimer.
What are the actual presentation images in the slide? Yeah.
Oh, the girlfriend.
Yeah.
You would see that one.
Pretty much just everything rectangular and the logos.
Yeah. So these logos, and then what else? Yeah. Okay. So he said it. Basically everything rectangular. These. Like if you remove these from the web page, you would actually be removing content from the web page. Like you would be removing information that people wanted to see from the web page. Whereas if you remove maybe like this background to this web page or this background to this menu, I mean there's really it just looks a little it doesn't look nice anymore, but it's not information that you need. When would you use background image? So what's another background image in any of these pictures?
So when would you use background image versus like actual images in the flow?
Yep.
Use a background image when you want to put your content, such as text or images, on top of it.
Yeah. So it's just like it's kind of like
the tan thing.
yeah. So this tan background is the background.
Can you think of images as something clickable? So like if it should be clickable, then
Sorry, can you?
Yeah. I think you think of images as clickable.
Yeah. Images.